Hello. It's Thursday, it's 5 o'clock. We're live, ready for another law firm marketing show and tell. This week, we're going to be talking about return on investment, having a look at goal setting as well. So we're going to be talking about some of the things such as setting KPIs, OKRs, and what exactly are BHAGs, which are one of my favorites. But before we get started and dive into that, we have 2 out of our usual 5 with us today. So let's start. And Cass, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kat Collier. I head up Flare Insight. We provide marketing research to help firms understand their target markets and clients and ultimately to grow their business.
Thank you very much. And Simon, welcome. How are you?
Doing good, yeah. It's good to see you. I'm Simon Marshall from TBD Marketing. I'm the founder of the Digital 100, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. We help smaller law firms with all their marketing needs, larger law firms with their digital marketing needs.
I like it. Short and snappy. Very nice. So as I say, we're going to be going through and
introduce yourself, David.
I should do, shouldn't I? Hi,
We'd
I'm
like
David.
You to. Who are you?
I know. Hi, I'm David SAYCE. I am a director at Papergecko. I am a digital marketing and SEO consultant working with professional services firms and B2B businesses. I deal a lot with the digital strategy along with the joys of website audits and website migrations. And as I'm going to keep plugging, Simon once said, I put the grace into migrations. I'm having a T-shirt made saying that.
Demrush haven't sent you one already, to be honest.
I must get on to them about that. Yes, very, very true. So we're going to be talking about the ROI, the return on investment, and I think this is quite interesting. I know when I first started out working with some of the legal firms, it was interesting how this is one of the core business metrics that we look at. What are we getting back for what we are putting in? And it wasn't really something that I saw talked about or measured much when I first started working in the legal sector. Now, I'm hoping that has changed for the vast majority of firms. But yeah, it's still something difficult to do, especially within marketing and often especially within digital as well. And I think it's going to be interesting, the discussion today, talking about the sort of things that we measure through a law firm, a legal services firm, and what can be fed back to those senior stakeholders to get a really good feel of what's happening with the business, where the money's going, and where the improvements are being made. So, Simon, what are your thoughts on the ROI of law firms? What should they be looking at?
Where do you start? I think your observation around, it not having been something that people wanted to tackle a few years ago is a fine one. Kat and I worked together a few years ago, and I think even back then we were starting out at CMS to do some kind of measurement stuff, and I think we were probably ahead of a lot of other firms. I remember some of the metrics I saw there I hadn't seen anywhere else I'd worked, and they were very good at it. And I think some firms were good along those lines, but I've been to other firms since that just nowhere near as advanced as that. Even 10 years later, they weren't as advanced as CMS were at that point in time. So despite it being your heart's desire, David, to say that would be the case at every law firm, I think there's still an opportunity for lots of firms to do a few things. And I think today, I was thinking about this ahead of time, and I know that doesn't happen that often, but I really was thinking about those 4 words that are in there for you. So measuring, I want us to talk about that a bit because that's quite important. Return, like what is that? Okay, What is that? Returns, what does it look like? Investment, what does that look like? Because that's not always clear and obvious as well. And then kind of the whole phrase, as it were, as well together. So I think it does need breaking down a little bit into those various different parts. Not just to drag out the session so it lasts 45 minutes, but actually because I think that it's easy to pick something and say, well, that's going to demonstrate return on investment. But actually, for those of us in marketing, those of us who are watching from management teams of law firms as well, being able to genuinely understand the difference that we're making with the money that we're putting in, the outcomes that we're achieving at the other end are worthwhile. and joining those two things up and doing more of those things that do work can't be a bad thing.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting. I think, this is the sort of topic where it almost becomes sometimes a bit of a checkbox, a bit of a buzzword. And I think it's one of those areas that is worth a deeper dive into for a lot of firms. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think, you were saying about going through and sort of almost spelling out the ROI, what it is. I can imagine this being quite a long episode to go into it in depth, especially when it comes to the area of goal setting for that, the ROI, how you're actually going to measure it. So, I think that might be a good place to start there. So the measurement start. What exactly should law firms be measuring?
Future pipeline. That's the one that I've always seen firms struggle with. So what the future pipeline is and how marketing has had an input into that, particularly with everything going on with the economy. So what bids are coming in, what the conversion rate is, how many new clients are coming in. And a lot of that can be found from finance, if they categorize it right, and from client inception and all of that side of the sphere. And I think marketing actually don't get involved quite a lot of the time in the building of systems and how they should be put together so that we can actually get some proper KPIs out of that. And yeah, in-house, I've been sat in many meetings where we've been trying to work out what should be put in for new matter codes and all that kind of stuff. But it's from that inception that you can start reporting, and it can be ultimately not the marketing team who have to report on it, which is always good. On the other side, it's if you have a CRM system that has the capability of having a pitch pipeline, as marketers, are you keeping that up to date? And have you got those benchmarks in place that mean that the BD teams within marketing are actually closing down pitches? Is there a certain point that partners are told that actually maybe after 6 months that pitch wasn't won and maybe we should close it down? That's always a bit of a bone of contention.
Just after an appraisal.
Yeah, but that's another point really, whether within marketing and BD there is goal setting that's more sales led, not just the CRM teams, but can we have a defined pitch win rate that they then have to start reporting on, and making sure that they have those KPIs themselves, not just the partners. So
I think that's interesting. I've worked with a number of professional services firms, both legal and financial, and seeing how they start to bring that in. So it isn't just a case of going out there and speaking to those potential clients. It's actually trying to measure, well, what was the impact from that? And I think that was something that I saw rarely happening in the earlier days. But I think it's something that can quite easily be gathered as well. It's about getting the processes in place, and making sure that those that are going out are reporting back. And it all leads on to the next meeting and how it goes forward.
It's an urgent ROI question coming in. That's literally the cat phone.
Cat's just been booked.
I'm putting do not disturb on.
It could be literally a matter of marketing life and death. Okay, I think you should keep going with it. One thing I was going to say really quickly on that is, and just to take one step back before we get too much into that again, but there is that one of the things that we did on the front of the last digital report that we did for someone was we put on a basketball court, and how those scoreboards are up at the top of above the court. I've never been to a live match in the US. I'd love to go as well, and I think I'd love everyone to take this metaphor away from today as well. Scoreboards are really important. There's a moment, isn't there, when we'd beaten Germany, was it 5-1 all those years ago, and there's a photo of Michael Owen underneath the scoreboard, like looking up at the thing as well, right? Scoreboards are essential because they reinforce things that are important to us, or we're checking in on them. Sometimes you've seen Wayne Rooney look at the scoreboard to motivate himself to think, we've got to do something differently as a result of this. That's why the scoreboard's there. It's to remind people what's going on. It isn't the game. It's not the game. The game can't be, you can't enjoy the game of cricket or football or basketball or anything by staring at the scoreboard, right? But it's there to remind us of the game we're playing and how to check in and what progress looks like against it. But sitting and willing it harder and harder to move and shift, except maybe in cricket, that's the one that gently ticks over anyway, I think. But, that's just the wrong game. And I wanted to mention that as a metaphor for what we do sometimes in law firms, right? What David was just talking about, people can get obsessed with scoring too much, trying to score too many things, trying to check in too often on things as well. That way, madness lies, right? No productivity will take place. No one will actually go and meet a client and have a coffee with them as well. But don't measure enough, nothing gets managed, right? And we can't do anything and make any improvements as well. So finding that balance, there is no balance. There's the great news for you. However you're doing it, it can be done better. However you're doing it. And some partners will say more and some will say less. Some marketing guys will say more and some will say less. But I just wanted you to know that it does fluctuate a bit, and that's the best way to do it, is to every few years just change how you're scoring things, how you're presenting those scores is a really nice kind of approach to doing things with an eye on where you're going over the long term. So it was just I wanted to make that observation before we got into too much of the details, that actually scoreboards are useful in and of themselves, but they're not the same thing as the game.
I think that's interesting, because I know there's been a lot of times where I've set up something similar in-house, and it's keeping the measurements front of mind, especially without sort of pushing it too much. So quite often we'll install some KPIs, some OKRs, and those will be in place either on the internal intranet on that home page that everyone visits when they log on to their computer. Or one of the things that we did, which I was especially keen on, was having the big TV screen in the marketing department that had key metrics for a lot of the stuff that we were doing. And that was actually really great about helping to reduce the silos as well, because people would come into the department and they'd straight away be inquisitive about, well, what is this, these numbers, these graphs, what's happening? Some of the data was great. It was live data. So especially with email sends and that we did, you'd see constant fluctuation and change, which was great. But we'd also give some information about how the month had run or how the quarter had run. And it was great to engage with people that would come into the department. And for those that were aware of it was nice and simple to say, okay, well, I can see how, especially our sector, maybe aviation or shipping or something like that, I can see how we're doing on some of our metrics there.
I think it gets over that challenge that Alex Lowe was telling me about a few weeks ago, which is that, that idea of somebody going into a meeting nowadays saying, I think, rather than I know. And I think that's quite an interesting insight. When anyone comes into the marketing team, they can see that it's evidence-based around you. You've got the statistics available immediately, a report that they can grab and take away, something on the internet, or your 72-inch David's email screen or whatever it might be up on the thing. And I think it's quite useful, isn't it? Because it does demonstrate, look, we are a data-informed part of the organization, and that in its own right is a step along the maturity of what Kat was covering earlier, right? I don't think you can race straight into having all of these kind of criteria and all these things published immediately, because there'll be tissue rejection around it. People won't feel comfortable with doing that immediately. But over time, having people understand these are some stats that you can use, and then having the whole firm understand those stats because they're repeated at the town halls and the kind of meetings and the online stuff. And over time, everyone getting more better educated about all of those things, and then coming to you, David, and going, right, on last week's open rate, this thing happened, and you're suddenly like, great, they're asking interesting detailed questions based on knowing that you'll know the answer with data. That's a very different conversation for marketers to be having.
And I think when it comes to the measurement side, I mean, Kat, I think you mentioned something very interesting there, and that is about that data gathering element. Marketing's not going to have all the information, and you need to look out to other parts of the business to find out where that is sitting and how you can pull that in, to a larger data set, or if you're probably magic circle a data lake, and starting interrogating that. But it's interesting. I know I've with a few of the firms I've worked, actually just bringing some of those business services departments, some of the fee earners together to understand where the data sits, what you have the capability of measuring, and then taking it from there on. Okay, well, what here is worth measuring as well?
I suppose we should root it in where the firm wants to go as well. So
yeah,
is the firm strategy around cross-selling? Is it building the new business pipeline? It might be both. But starting it, or are they repositioning themselves? So there may be a PR element to it. Are they looking to go into certain different sectors, for example? And so then you can start from a marketing perspective, think, right, we may need to increase our PR exposure in certain sector publications. And so therefore that becomes what your measurement is. So we haven't really talked about from kind of top down, I suppose. So reflecting the business need is exactly what's needed, isn't it? So
but you liked on something very interesting right at the front end, and I think you can marry those two things together. Where's the business going, and how do we measure against that? So if we but you were talking about like leads coming through the door and then measuring at that point in time, and I was going to suggest actually slightly further up the funnel, we should be projecting forward about things that we're doing in marketing that are going to lead to those leads coming through the door. We're not going to run an employment law campaign just because it's a nice thing to do. We're going to do it because it's going to lead to those leads coming through the door for you later on. I think some projections need to be made around that. Like, if we look back up the funnel, we should be able to project things to say this many bums will come on seats to sit on Zoom calls or come to seminars. This many people should be downloading reports. This many people should come into web pages based on historic knowledge plus a forward-looking element of what we're doing. Because Kat, you tell me if you disagree, but I fundamentally believe that when we've got to put numbers on the board over here on that scoreboard, right, to score goals, we've got to have a certain amount of shots on goal, and to get shots on goal, we've got to have assists. And to get assists, we've got to have owning the midfield. And it's the same metaphor really for what happens all the way backwards from the sales bit. I know I'm not talking specifics for a minute, that's intentional, but if you're going to have sales made, you need business development meetings and coffees and pitches, right? And backwards from there, you need to have met people in an environment, a marketing environment, that they feel comfortable networking with you, and you can discern whether or not you'd like to do business for them, chemistry. And backwards from there, say downloads, reports, email opens, whatever it might be, as that lend themselves to be the kind of people that are going to come along to your event, and then you can work that out. And then backwards from there, the unknown audience becoming a known audience. Who do we qualify? How do we meet them in the first place? And I think that I'd like to see more of that, but not just backwards.
Yeah,
it's easy to say, oh, David, can you provide me a load of stats about the web? Yeah, we can. I literally got access to all those stats. I can tell you everything. And
don't ask us
one
for
of
data.
The very wisest people I know said the other day to me, everything you need to know about employment law in 2020 is pretty much irrelevant in 2022, right? Because everything that we did then has got nothing to do with what's coming next, right? Really, I thought it was such a clever observation. It's like, look, we went through this, like the data's useless. It's historic data, and it's about a pandemic period, and we've got to be really careful in marketing, about doing exactly the same thing. Kat, how many people on the ESG front have thought about what kind of work is going to come out of it, and how much work it is, how much they're going to quantify those figures, how many things they need to do all the way up the funnel behind it? I don't know.
I don't know either. I think that's a broad concept, the whole ESG thing, but that people are piling into. But you can see some law firms have segmented it into their specific target markets. So the GCs, for example, I know Deschert, I think, did one that was specifically for GCs, and they almost had the funnel on there. So it was like the wider campaigns down to specific tactical events that they were doing, and they had it segmented by that. But I haven't seen anything. I was going to ask actually whether either of you know of a technology that would sum up somebody visiting a website to see an article and then seeing them move down the chain.
David,
I know of one.
The other day? We were literally working on a funnel visualization the other day.
Yeah, it's something I do quite a bit, and it's interesting. I mean, you can get some of it out of Google Analytics. I always think with Google products, they're almost raw data, so they do take some work, some fiddling with. I know both Si and myself are big fans of Data Studio and being able to pull all sorts of information into there, mess about with this, and create something that is useful. There are products out there as well which will dive deeper into that conversion element. One of them was from a company that I have close ties with, funnily enough.
Well, you got ties from them now as well.
Actually, they haven't done ties yet. So, there are a number of products out there.
Products there.
So this is the analysis of the flow, trying to understand how people are maneuvering through a website. With SEMrush, they have a product, I think it's called Impact Hero. It's a bit of JavaScript that goes onto your website, and it gives you an idea. It's one I haven't actually tried yet, but actually for one client, I'm going to be having a look at that shortly. But it's interesting. I mean, just out of GA alone, making sure that you've got events, goals, funnels set up correctly, and then also having a look. Don't forget that you're going to have a look at possibly cross-domain setup as well. So that's when you dive into things like Google Tag Manager and some of the technical side. For some of the websites I've worked with, Careers has been on a subdomain. And it's times like that you want to follow that traffic around those particular areas and understand what's going on.
So just quickly on that then, I'm going to come back to Kat's point, right? Does that product exist out there that kind of does it all across, omni-channel, all the way across law firm marketing as well? If it exists, I haven't seen it yet, and I'd love to be at the front of the queue to obviously license that product. So if anyone's watching this and they do that, let me know, right? It will come. Right, I genuinely believe it will come, because there's a certain set of industry standards that, have you noticed, law firms I think are migrating towards rather than away from. So people are moving more towards systems that everyone else uses, like Salesforce and MailChimp and Eventbrite and things like that. Right, I think they are doing more of that, and the more you go into those worlds, those funnels do exist a bit better. So I think we're going to get there eventually. I think it is art and science. I think it's a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
Did you read that amazing piece the other day? I can't remember who released it, about how the funnel is just a load of rubbish. There is no funnel. Humans just aren't like that, and they kind of go like this all over the place. But strangely, I'm still a great believer that the more you do of that, the more you'll get of this down the bottom, right? And it doesn't matter that people don't map a perfect journey, but the more people that read the more times you appear on Google, the more people read your website, and the more people make sales at the bottom, all the way other things in the meantime. But if you don't do that, then this is unlikely to happen. And so whatever else we might think, to Kat's point, let's measure it, right? Let's put some numbers on the board, and there's much more data available to marketers. I did a fun campaign for someone recently about meeting room usage. I totally geeked out for 3 hours crunching data on who'd been in like the rooms and how they'd been used, everything. It's brilliant fun, right? Because it was a part of the journey that I'd never been able to quantify previously, and we got some amazing pictures out of it. We knew when things would be booked out, when they shouldn't be booked out, and all the really amazing insights for them as a business as well.
It's funny. I use Hotjar on a number of websites, and this is initially, I think it started as heat mapping. So you understand how people are dealing with the website, but it also has video recording as well. And you can easily get lost in that, a fun Friday evening watching videos of people on your website and how they travel through and what they click on. But I think, coming back to what you were saying there, Simon.
That doesn't look like she's remotely in a Friday night doing that. She's literally like, what is he talking about?
That's how exciting things get here during lockdown.
That's what Amy's doing at the moment. She's sat there with the iPad just.
Oh yeah, she may only be 5, but I've got her. She's there on Hotjar
tracking her usage.
But I think it comes back to some of what you were saying. There is a lot of data out there. There's a lot that can be measured, but I think it's also important when you're starting out to be very careful in what you're actually going to do. Why am I getting an echo?
Oh dear. Are we all echoey?
Oh, it's just me. You carry on. Let me sort out what's happening here.
How do you capture? So, if we're talking about social media in general, are there tools that will capture what's going on in LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever way that you're engaging with your audience? So not just the website.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So again, there are a number of tools that you can use to bring all that together. Again, you can use something like Data Studio. I mean, I think MailChimp has an API in. Well, I mean, with the great thing with Data Studio is you can even just put stuff into Google Sheets and start messing around with the data, which is again another great Friday evening activity.
We have developed a template over the last few days where anybody can download company page data from LinkedIn, and we dump it in Sheets, and it automatically plugs into a dashboard that we've created for them in Data Studio. Right, so that is a very easy way, because we think that LinkedIn doesn't tell you enough about some of the things that are going on with your data. So we have found some really specific judgment, KPIs, observations, and things that you need to be looking at. So one of the things, Kat, is we run a little table for every firm on who's posted the post and how many likes and points of engagement they get. It's quite often that the head of comms doesn't do as well as you might expect them to, and there's some youngster in the department who knows how to use social media properly, who absolutely smashes it in terms of both engagement, likes, and comments, right? Because they produce different content. But you know what it's like in a law firm. People are competitive, so you put a table out in front of them, everyone thinks, oh, don't do that, don't put a table in front, and then you do it, and then everyone's scores improve because they'll think, right, I need to learn, how do I do that better? And they can literally see the posts at work. And what
I'll tell you back.
Use Shield to do personal data. I don't have a discount app. David probably does. Got a discount.
No, I don't.
It's quite expensive, or it can be, but you learn a lot about your own kind of LinkedIn usage. And what we've done there is say to people, take the trial for a couple of weeks, download the data, and you can pivot that and find out a lot about what you're doing on social. You probably only really need to check in once or twice a year, so it's no big deal if you do that as well. Twitter, we've created a dashboard for as well with a fee for. There's a bit of that, but those are, I think, in their own modular way, they're quite interesting. But it's how do you join them up, isn't it, into the bigger thing? What does good look like as well?
I was working at BLP when they were trying to integrate HubSpot, and I think 18 months before I left, they started the project. It was still going on. Just the idea of trying to get different systems together and getting IT to then verify it and all of those different perspectives. The idea of integrating it with your own systems can just lead it to being a 2 or 3 year project that people then forget about. But yeah, that was my experience. So.
They sell the dream very well, I think, and the reality of it is, fundamentally you're still going to be reliant on some of those data sources. There's probably a lot of elbow grease to get into there. I was talking to Paul, is it from My Customer Lens this week as well, and he inhabits that really interesting sweet spot of, I'll take sources that we already know about for kind of client feedback, but I will go and find all of the other stuff that's going on around your business that's got the client feedback points, and I'll do it. And it's that kind of half, data sources and half discovery and consultation bit, and taking the hard work out of it. That's got a lot of future, I think, Kat, for the kind of things you were talking about as well, like really knowing where you are today, who you are, the words that are being used about your business. There's a lot to learn in, that kind of stuff that's already being said. He's a good guy. He's going to come on as a guest at some point, I think, as well, and talk about that in the future. David, do you want to talk about the setting goals side of things? I don't think we covered that yet. Do you want to, because you were busy echoing?
Yeah, I think when it comes to setting goals, I think it's important to be realistic. I mean, I think as Kat's just implied there, sometimes these projects can take on a life of their own, last for too long just in the setup and the integration. I think it's often important just to start measuring, and if that is something simple, then so be it. I think it takes practice. And it takes some commitments across the firm to start gathering this data, understanding it. And I think starting small and building on that is a key way to go. I mean, I know with a few of the law firms I've worked with, especially, just starting with some of the digital data, improving knowledge across the firm on how web, email, social work, then starting to bring that together into the sectors and the campaigns. And then bringing that in with, as we spoke about earlier, data from finance, data from other areas of the business. Have people within these organizations attended events? When did we last meet them? Did they open up the email? When was the last time they were a paying client? And another one we found was, and this was quite interesting, how they crossed sectors within the law firm, because it was quite this particular law firm had about 5 or 6 specific sectors which were quite siloed. And it was interesting. You could have partners 2 doors down from each other in the office who had very little awareness that they actually had the same client. So bringing some of that together, and I mean, Simon and myself, we've spoken about this golden thread before, and that's where this was leading to, gathering in that data and understanding how it works across the whole of the business as well. But just starting with the basics is absolutely fine. You have to start somewhere.
I don't think it does any harm. People who've worked with me are going to be very surprised about what I'm going to say. I think it does any harm to cheerlead for a bit. Right? Let's just celebrate some successes for a bit. Okay to say, look, this is going well. It's going better than it was last year, and find some things that if what we've got to do, Charlotte would say this if she were here, is take people with us. Then let's get people emotionally to at least go, okay, I'm comfortable with this scoreboard. It's going the right way, and I kind of say, and then we can start to introduce this slightly more. Okay, that's great, but did you know there's a bit of nuance here? It's not working quite so well in 2 of our jurisdictions, and please can we have a think about what that might mean, or whatever it is. And I think that's we're showing you the headline figure, it's like this, but actually in real estate, the read time's not as good as it is over here, or not as many people come to this partner when they speak at a webinar. I'm literally thinking of one individual, and I think that having that data and being able to go and have the right conversations in the background, they don't even need to know that you got the data. They don't. It's just that we're informed as marketeers and go and have conversations with people and say, oh, I wonder if you've thought about this, or can I privately talk to you about something over here? And that's okay. They don't need that heralding across the whole firm and telling everyone. No one comes to your webinars.
I think that's vital when it comes to measuring and goal settings, that it isn't a case of why has this dropped, but specifically taking the time to go, look, we have done a good job here. And as you say, taking the time to celebrate that, because that is often something that is forgotten.
I think it's even forgotten within marketing, because there are capabilities within marketing, or even not just celebration, but education between the teams. So, for example, the CRM database team will have a huge amount of information, but often don't take a step back and go, right, okay, if we've got future capabilities, for example, does every BD team know that if they email people at 5:30 on a Friday, they may not get a great click-through rate, that kind of stuff? So being able to present that information back and making sure that they're actually using it, or what the successes that the PR team or the pitching team have been if they've got that.
And actually vice versa, like after the pandemics, like here, did you know that 5:30 on a Friday is a really good time to get people to read stuff? And it sounds like that wouldn't be the case, but I literally did a LinkedIn update the other day and said, right, nobody reads links on a Friday night. Let's see how this goes. 6,000 views later. It's like, yeah, well, I know that you're
I was there just having my Friday evening data.
The emails aren't being read at the same times of days as they were a year ago, 15 months ago. So, and they're not being read internally at the same time as they were a year or two ago. So if you want to communicate with your employees, why are you doing it at the same slot you used to do? They're not sat at their desk at 1 o'clock with a brown bag and sandwich. They're sat in the hot tub with their family, right? Taking a break from their desk for a minute, and they're not going to read your email. So why not send it to them when they're actually going to read it, which is 6:45 a.m. instead, when it's the first thing they do in the day and it sets the tone. So data for behaviors for data, it's that's what David's talking about, that golden thread. I think it should sit there as goals, as targets, as a scoreboard as well, but it should inform what we're doing. And I think it's really important to have that available to people and educate people. Cats hit on something really interesting there. It's a big thing for me. I think there's not enough data skills amongst marketers at the moment, right? Now I know that a lot of those people are attracted to jobs in B2C at the moment, and they're bound to be, because that's where a lot of that stuff is happening. But if you can bring data to what you're doing, if you know how to report or use a data studio report, whatever it might be, set a goal and work against it and show people what you're doing and herald all the good work that you've been doing, you will literally be welcomed, with laid down palms, I think, in the law firm as well, because people love that stuff, and you constantly showing them how well they've done at something. And if I were to say anything to any young legal marketers watching as well, please do go and invest a bit of time. You don't need to learn how to code SQL. What you need to do is learn how to get other people to do it. I would suggest you should focus your energies on learning how to visualize data. It will pay itself back in spades. If you can learn how to use Google Sheets as well as Excel, and then learn how to use Data Studio, it will be 2 or 3 months of your life very well spent. It will set you ahead of your competitors briefly, because everyone's going to be doing it soon, I think.
I think that's
your goal setting. I'm just going to get back to that for a minute, right? But your goal setting, I did have it feels a bit unfair to pick on the supplier, but there was one supplier out there in the legal sector who does this. It's the name of one of your things on your list of big things to talk about, right? So setting objectives, and that's not it, but it's similar to that. And I just realized it was just like another to-do list that people weren't going to get to, right? So this is that balance again, right? If people are setting big goals, that's great, right? If we're setting goals that are meant to be met, that's great, right? And we're going to reward the kind of right behaviors that behind them. But whatever we do, don't take like a perfectly good pen and piece of paper, put it online in a fancy system and spend 20 grand a year on that and still don't achieve those goals, right? It's not. Yeah. That's what I mean. We've got to get away from that in favor of, okay, here's some objectives. Do we broadly agree that's where we're going? Okay, they look, some people say to you, they're not smart enough, so they're not this, that. Well, fine. I got that, right? But that doesn't work for every business, right? If a piece of litigation comes in and walks your way and it's 2 million quid rather than £500,000, what are we supposed to do? Pat ourselves on the back doubly because, somebody needed us to do a high level of litigation otherwise. That's not right necessarily, is it? Not always, I don't think. So I don't know. I think there's some stuff in there about setting goals.
I think there's something quite important that you touched on there, and that is the smart side of things. So do you want to go into that in a little bit more depth? So what is smart?
There's a lot of thinking out there that all goals should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Okay, so that's fine. And there's a lot of theory behind that as well. But there's been quite a bit of pushback against that over the last couple of years. Like, look, what if those smart objectives, aren't they stop you from achieving a different aim? What if they blind you to things that you could be doing? What if you're saying, well, we're focused on this thing, and all your market conditions have changed, and that was the wrong objectives to be stuck with? One law firm partner at least recently said to me, I'm not going down that route. That's not how I'm going to run my business. I don't want to do it that way. And it was a real wake-up call to me that you don't have to run things that way all the time. Actually, sometimes within bandwidths and broadly, and it doesn't need to be quite so specific. Now, does it need to be fitting with values and the quality of your business and broadly those? Yes, right? So there were other limits on what they were willing to do and not willing to do. But after that, they weren't willing to say it's got to be X, because they felt as though they would make the wrong decisions around their business. I think that's really interesting. We obsess with some of those objectives as if they are written in stone.
Yeah.
Right. And they're not. They're just I often use a sailing metaphor at this point in time. When Ben Ainsley wants to win, for those of you who are old enough, he doesn't aim the yacht straight at the finishing line and hope to get there. He literally sails with the wind. Tack, 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 and we'll get there quicker. If you just aim it straight, you'll never get there if you don't have the wind directly behind you. And I think that's a good metaphor. We have to set some goals and then go, oh, wait a minute, tack and tack and tack and do things like that.
I think it's always good to have a look at these and think about how they'll work within the business. And it depends on, what is the size of your marketing department who are going to be looking at these on a daily, weekly basis. I think treat them as guidelines, treat them as sometimes as the benchmarks to go towards. But yeah, it's when things like that end up stopping you moving forward that you have to reevaluate and think, is this the right approach?
I'm just trying to think of an example, right? If you said, for example, we've got to have, 25 clients in the employment law sector, blah, 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 over a certain time frame, but all of your employment partners are completely maxed out working for 12 people, earning more money and more profit than they've ever done. Yet you insisted on chasing that goal and delivering the marketing to try and deliver another 13 people. That's the wrong activity. Do you know what I mean? That's just a very practical example about how the goal is set and then the context changes because maybe we've doubled profitability or the scale or whatever we're doing as well. Yeah, I think even kind of moderate goals are better than none, right? I think it's a good idea to have some. And as I said on previous calls, Simon Heald from VWV said to me, set 3-year goals, set 1-year goals, and when you hit your 1-year goal, set another 1-year goal, right? it's fluid. It keeps going. I thought that was a really interesting insight, is don't let last week's, success mean that you don't have to do anything for 11 months, of the rest of the year. I think that's quite an interesting kind of approach because it means you're always on your toes and kind of keeping going. I think there's a lot to talk about there for kind of partnership teams, leadership teams as well.
I get the feeling this is probably a topic that we'll be revisiting a number of times. There's quite a bit of depth here. I think we're looking to
just very quickly before you do wrap up, because I know we're going to go to in a minute. Kat, to your point, would it be worth David and I doing a show and tell and bringing some of those KPIs and show you on screen what some of those scores or proxy scores or David, I don't know if you're up for that or if you feel as though you're giving away the rocket science, but I think that we've probably got 8-10 scores that you and I regularly come across that we'd say, well, they're not perfect, but they were when it doesn't work, then you know which part of the bottling plant to go and look at to go and find out what's going on, right? And at least if you've got a proxy score, a KPI if you like, then you'll know, oh, wait a minute, I need to go and look at LinkedIn now because there's just been a huge drop off. And then you go and find out why and you go, it's okay or it's not. There might be a reason for it, right? So, David, why don't we do that next time? We'll bring some show and tell. We'll actually bring some show to the show and tell.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I'll stop talking.
How about that? Right, well, we're coming up to 45 minutes here and we're going to be heading off soon. So any last words, Kat? Your thoughts on ROI, measuring and goals?
My last tips are just see what technologies you already have, see if other departments can do the work for you, or even see if your vendors can do the work for you. Do you pay them a lot of money? Can they put those dashboards together for you so you don't have to do the work?
I like that. That's good. And Simon?
If you're worried about what to do for your appraisal this year and you think about what you're going to achieve for the next year, I would put some stuff in there that is measurable. I would put in some goals. And then I would try and make sure that your bonus or your salary kind of increases are aligned with hitting those goals as well. It works for the rest of the business. Lawyers are judged by a lot of those targets. So I'm a great believer that marketers can be too.
And when you have your appraisal, Simon is available via video link.
I'll coach you on how to present that failing KPI. Yeah.
No, I think that's good advice. I mean, I just had to come back and say, I think, for anyone just starting out looking at this topic, there is great information out there about some of the goals that we've spoken about. One of my favorite books on this is Measure What Matters. And that's around the OKR aspect of goals, which is well worth a read, but it's important to find what works for you. So we're gonna wrap up now. I'm just going to say, if you are watching this live, there's a great webinar about to start on YouTube. It is a SEMrush webinar. I'm not in it, but Pierre Farr is doing an SEO consultation, which is starting at 6 o'clock. So that's where I'm heading off to. Another data-packed, fun evening for me. Thank you very much, Kat. Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for everyone who's been watching this live, and for everyone watching the recording. Where were you? We missed you. And until next week, I'd just like to say, take care.
Cheers.
Bye.